Simple. Each of us gets about 60 seconds to outline our argument about our chosen topic. Then we all pile in, and it gets more chaotic than Labour's plans to tackle climate change. And of course, we want to know your views as well. Please do get in touch throughout the show by emailing gbviews@gbnews.com. But before we start tearing each other apart, it is time for your Saturday night news with Polly Middlehurst.
Emily, thank you. Good evening to you. The top story tonight on GB News. 2 motorbikes have been recovered by police investigating a fatal hit-and-run incident in Walsall in the West Midlands. 7-year-old Katlis Selesnev was taken to hospital in a critical condition following the collision on Thursday night, later dying of her injuries. A 14-year-old boy was arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. He's now been released on police bail with strict conditions as inquiries continue. Rail services have been disrupted again today, with thousands of workers walking off the job in a long-running dispute over pay. RMT members at 14 train companies are on strike, with passengers being advised to check before they travel. In some areas, only half of services are running, while in others, there are no services at all. Poland's Prime Minister says 100 Wagner Group mercenaries in Belarus have moved closer to the Polish border, and that could pose a threat to his country. He's warned Wagner troops might pose as Belarusian border guards and try to infiltrate the country. Early this month, Poland moved troops to the east of the country amid rising concerns that Wagner fighters in Belarus could lead to increased border tensions. And that comes as Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky visited troops near the front line in the eastern region of Donetsk. A counter-offensive by Ukrainian forces has had some success in the area in recent weeks. Now in news here at home, a former paratrooper has completed a 19,000-mile charity walk around the UK coastline. Chris Lewis was joined by hundreds of supporters as he crossed the finish line at Llangennych Beach in Wales. The father of 2 raising £500,000 in the process for SAFA. That's the Soldiers, Sailors and Airmen's Families Association. Mr Lewis set off from the same spot 6 years ago with only a few supplies and a tenner in his pocket. He says he never stopped believing in himself.
Have a focus, something that you can focus on and just pursue it. Don't let anybody tell you can't. And, have a bit of faith in yourself. All the parts of this journey where people said that I shouldn't do it, it's never been done or anything like this, they're the parts that I love the most.
And lastly, thousands of people have taken part in Belfast's largest ever Pride Parade today. More than 250 groups took part in today's event, and police officers were asked to wear their uniforms, but the Police Service of Northern Ireland declined that request, citing the need to be seen as impartial. Meanwhile, in Liverpool, crowds took to the streets as the city there hosted a Pride Parade, this time on behalf of the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News.
Thank you, Polly. It is Saturday night and this is the Saturday 5. I'm Emily Carver and I can promise that you are in for a very spicy hour. So let's get the show on the road. Now, then Darren may have turned 30 years old, but don't worry, the passing years have not detracted from his anger at government immigration policy. Yes, it's crime time.
Yep, shame, shame, shame. I tell you, the shame that engulfs our proud island nation. We witness a colossal £7 million of your money squandered on indulgent hotels for those crossing the English Channel from France. Yet when it comes to finding a home for a brave soul who selflessly crossed that very channel to fight the Nazis in France, suddenly they can't seem to get their act together. Alfred Gwenegault, 98 years old, who landed at Pegasus Bridge as Allied troops stormed Normandy in 1944, has been told he has to wait 12 months for accommodation by his local council. Let's have a listen.
This is Alfred Gwenegault, a 98-year-old D-Day veteran, currently living in a hostel after being evicted from his rented bungalow. Alfred lived for 7 years in the property in Dorset with his daughter and son-in-law. They were forced to move after being served a no-fault eviction notice by their landlord.
I can't see a future.
I don't know about you, but I want to say a heartfelt thank you to Alfred from the depth of my heart. You know, thank you for everything that you did. We stand resolutely with you against this injustice. It's a shameful display revealing how skewed our priorities are, where we disregard the sacrifices made by heroic veterans. I think our nation has to do better and put those who served their country with the courage at the forefront of our charity. It's a charity that ought to start at home, not for those coming here with scant regard for the laws of our land. I say to hell with prioritising fighting age men who are coming here illegally. We ought to be prioritising the once fighting age men who selflessly fought to liberate a continent from Nazi tyranny. It's a damn joke. But, Benjamin, I'm assuming that you're going to say that I'm some kind of bigot or something like that. Your heart must surely go out to Alfred.
Well, look, let me tell you, I'd call you a bigot whether you'd said that monologue or not. The reality of what you just tried to do there by linking the appalling plight of that 98-year-old man, you know, he gave a huge amount to this country, but even if he hadn't, that would still be appalling, against migrants, against refugees, trying to pit two vulnerable groups who have nothing really in common in this situation, I think is the problem. And the truth is that the problem there is this thing of no-fault evictions.
Exactly.
The idea that a wealthy landlord in a sort of Dickensian manner can throw someone out. What I want to know, and, you know, generally I don't like witch hunts, but I'd want to know who that landlord was that thought that was appropriate. And that's why the government, which has been wavering on this question, should crack on and stop wealthy landlords being able to chuck their residents out with no reason.
Well, I think actually we need to just build more houses so that people, landlords and people like that...
What's that got to do with people crossing the channel? I think Benjamin's made a very good point there about the problem here being no-fault evictions. I completely agree with you that we need to build more houses, but what's that got to do?
I'll tell you what it's got to do. 40,000 people came over last year. We've had tens of
thousands. But the issues that you're talking about are serious issues. No-fault evictions, that needs to be looked at properly. The government needs to be liberalising planning to allow house builders, both public and private, to build more homes. I just don't see the need to link
Well, we wouldn't need so many homes.
I don't see the need to link that to this veteran who has wrongly been thrown out of his house and migrants crossing the channel.
Because people look at this veteran, Albie. People look at this veteran.
I think you're framing it slightly incorrectly. I mean, Benjamin, not all of the people that have come to this country are asylum seekers that are vulnerable. We saw last year 1 in 4 were Albanian men. Albania is a safe country. Now,
but this man wasn't kicked out of his house for an Albanian. Let's just get the facts straight.
But we're making the comparisons here. The comparison that we need to be looking at is, I think Darren is absolutely right, building more homes.
He's applied for social housing. He's not been able to get it. We have massive demands for social housing.
Well, I tell you what.
How is immigration not making that worse?
It's your pin-up lady, Maggie Thatcher, that did that. She sold off all of the council houses in this country and they weren't rebuilt for the generation after them. That 98-year-old doesn't have any social housing because your fangirl, Maggie, went and sold it.
Even if Maggie Thatcher had left all the social housing, the fact of the matter is that your man, Tony Blair, allowed mass migration into this country that has ensured that we don't have enough housing.
Sorry, just to say very quickly, I think you'll find immigration under Tony Blair was a fraction of what it's been under the Tories.
Well, it certainly started the EU side of things.
May I just say something? Because it may not be a direct comparison that Darren has drawn there in his...
It's not a direct comparison. There's nothing made up about it.
But it is a stark example of where government priorities seem to be wrong, according to, I would say, probably the majority of the country. And it's not just this chap. We have huge rates of homelessness, particularly among veterans across the country. And I'm sorry, but most people, looking at the amount of money being spent on hotel accommodation, on barges, now on 2,000 marquees, for people who have come here illegally, they have, according to our national law, I think that is fair enough to point out that the government has got priorities wrong and they need to do something about this issue.
And it's taxpayer money that's being funded for these hotel rooms, for these individuals to come here that have come here illegally. I think the solution, as
they haven't come here illegally.
They have. Those individuals have come here illegally.
Seeking refuge is by nature legal.
And we know for a fact that all of them are refugees. I mean, the fact that 1 in 4 migrants came from a safe country like Albania is ridiculous. And Benjamin, I think you have to admit that not all of them are genuine refugees.
The acceptance rates are something like 90-95% for people from countries like Afghanistan and Yemen. But let me just point out a wider remark on this immigration issue. The government 2 weeks ago added another profession to its list where we desperately need immigrants. Bricklayers. How are you going to build any of these bloody houses if you don't have any bricklayers?
That's legal immigration. That's not legal.
You need immigrants to build houses.
What proportion of those coming across the channel are bricklayers?
No, that's a stupid remark, because they come here and then if they get a right to work, they will go into an industry in which we need them.
And why do we need so many bricklayers?
Benjamin, you're confusing illegal immigration with legal immigration. I'm perfectly happy to see more bricklayers come to this country if that's what we need.
Legally.
But these are illegal immigrants that Darren is talking about. And unfortunately, it does feel as though we are leaving alone people in this country that have fought for our country and instead prioritising those that come here illegally.
This man, Alfred, was left in a hostel because of a no-fault eviction. That is the issue here. So I think the debate we should be having, this isn't what I think or don't think, but it's about the debate that we should be having, should be about no-fault evictions, not about people crossing the
because he's
channel.
still trying to get social housing. His council have told him he's got to wait 12 months. Why have they told him that? Because there are massive demands for social housing.
The main reason that the social housing list is so long is because of people crossing the channel. Darren, do you really believe that?
I do really believe that immigration is adding massive demands and constraints on housing.
The main reason that demands on social housing are so high is because of the channel crossing crisis.
It's because too many
I'm saying
people
it's
are asking
exacerbating that problem, leading to 98-year-old veterans not getting the help they deserve.
So what is the reason? What are the main reasons?
Because we are focusing on 40,000 other people. Lack of housing, migration, and then thirdly, well, it would be a case of the wrong priorities. The government doesn't have people like Alfred in their priorities.
So could we make an argument about needing to build more houses without having to talk about people crossing the channel? Is that possible?
Well, I'm going to let you have that, because I need to move on and let you have your go on being angry about being rejected when you try to go on Countdown. Because you're going to have a moan, I think, Albie, about Carol Vorderman. Take it away.
So my grandmother always told me, Albie, that 3 things are certain in life: death, tax, and virtue-signalling left-wing celebrities like Carol Vorderman complaining about the Conservative Party. Now, I like Carol Vorderman. She's an amazing mathematician, an amazing broadcaster, and I'm envious of her sex life. Yeah, apparently, according to the Daily Mail, she has 5 men on the go at once. I'm envious. Look, it's one thing to be your standard kind of celebrity type who goes on about how much they hate the Conservatives, like Eurovision's May Muller, for example, who this week had a pop at Made in Chelsea's Georgia Toffolo for saying that David Cameron still has it after his barnstorming speech at the LGBT Conservatives' gay marriage reception earlier on this week. I was there, it was a barnstorming speech, and I can tell you David Cameron absolutely still has it. I can understand people like May Muller, because they've always been anti-Conservative. But guess who was one of David Cameron's maths advisors back in 2012? Countdown's very own Carol Vorderman. Now, look, I've said I like Carol, but she's a turncoat. How can you go from 2012 being one of David Cameron's maths advisors, sitting next to him, posing for a picture like she was just there, to going on about how much you hate the Conservatives all the time, how much you hate Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, Johnny Mercer, going on tirades about how corrupt and awful this government is, when back in 2010, she was one of the Conservative Party's biggest supporters. It's this kind of hypocrisy that really irritates people. Carol, we get it. You don't like the Tories. Look at the polls. You're not the only one. But instead of sitting at the sidelines, carping and moaning, why don't you join a political party, stand for election, and try and make a difference, rather than sitting behind your phone, writing tweets, trying to get more followers and more attention? Benjamin Butterworth, I feel that you might have a lot of affinity with what Carol's doing.
Well, I'm not sleeping with 5 men at once, if that's what you're asking. Yeah, I mean, that was just the biggest load of claptrap I've heard in 3 months, because woman changes her mind on how she votes. That's basically it. You made my argument for me when you pointed out that she supported David Cameron and the Tories in the 2010 election and some of the years after that. But the truth is that, like somewhere between 40 and 50% of the population, she can see that the Tories have been hopeless in government, that our economy is a disaster zone, and that there's not much hope under this leadership. And so she's using her voice like any reasonable person. If you say that Carol Vorderman shouldn't use the big platform that she has as a long-time celebrity, it's like saying that people shouldn't go and campaign in their local village or their local town about issues they care about.
She's doing that nationally. She's using her voice, Benjamin, to say things like the Han in Matt Hancock is silent. Is that really something one of our most loved television broadcasters should be saying about an elected politician?
Well, call me a freedom of speech activist, Albie, but I don't think you need to police...
I didn't say
you don't need to police people's language like that.
She should have said.
He didn't say it should be illegal.
She's clearly just trying to stay relevant. This is a very popular thing to do. You get millions of followers from going against the Tories. You know, it's like the Gary Lineker thing, other people like Marina Purkis. It's just a classic thing to do. Also, what's quite funny about her tweets is that most of them seem to have these little fact-check things on them, because more often than not, she gets her facts wrong, which is surprising from someone who's so interested in numbers.
Do you think you'd say that about a man, Emily?
Pardon?
Do you think you'd say that about a man, that they're only expressing their views because they're trying to stay relevant? I think she can speak for herself. She can have her own views.
If her tweets have to be fact-checked, and we know what nonsense goes out online, then I would say that perhaps she needs to read a little bit more about politics before she pipes up. But she's free to do so, of course she is, but we're free to make fun of her.
Speaking of being patronising, though, the fact that she said, you know, not a degree in sight when she was tweeting Johnny Mercer...
Oh, she's a snob. She's an absolute snob.
It's stuck up more than a bum. Right? She's had goodness only knows what pumped into it, and it's clearly gone to her head.
I mean, it looks great. You know, she's getting more attention from men than I am. But Darren Grimes, sorry, Reem Ibrahim even. Don't you think
we look quite similar, don't we?
You look quite similar. You've both got dark hair and pale skin at the moment. But don't you think it's important, actually, for people that have platforms like Carol Vorderman, to actually do something, stand for election and try and make a difference in Parliament?
I do think that what she's doing here is she's trying to sort of attempt to stay relevant. I think that Emily is right. I think that fundamentally I do sympathise with people that have lost love with the Conservative Party, and we've got the highest tax burden in 70 years. I don't think that necessarily Carol Vorderman has lost love with the party because she's this free market maverick. I actually think she's trying to sort of stay relevant. But I mean, we're all free to have arguments about whether or not the Conservative Party are the future.
Is there something fashionable, Benjamin Butterworth, about left-wing celebrities? Is there something fashionable about left-wing celebrities just hating on the Conservative Party? I mean, I wouldn't even say that Carol Vorderman was particularly left-wing, but is it just fashionable to hate the Conservatives?
The gibberish of this. Look, if they came out and said something right-wing, if they said they don't like the left-wing, they'd get a show on this channel, right? People are free to express their views, and the condescending attitude that she somehow is only doing it to stay relevant. Carol Vorderman is a multi-millionaire. She's 62. She's been famous since the moment she left Cambridge and got a job on Countdown. She don't need to have arguments with Baroness Mone or about COVID.
Did she go to the press about her sex life? Right, surely that's another example of trying to stay relevant. I mean, really.
But that is someone... Yeah, that's someone believing that. Of course.
And all the plastic surgery. Come on.
Yes, she's probably not a millionaire anymore.
I'm not being mean about her. She's had a very successful career, but I mean, of course she wants to stay relevant.
Benjamin, who are you?
If she were trying to
tell Emily she's being sexist?
Because the way you're talking about her, you're talking about her image, you're saying she just does it to be relevant.
By you, Benjamin Butterworth. I'm purely talking about what I can see with my own eyes. I have nothing against the woman, really. I just think it's quite obvious that she's trying to stay relevant.
Well, I'd hate to be someone you do.
There's an interesting question, though. There's an interesting question, Albie, and that is, she has a weekly BBC Radio Wales, I believe, show, a programme. Yeah, the Mail are saying she's got a weekly programme on BBC Wales. Do you think the BBC should, you know, reprimand and say, you're doing a Lineker, pipe down?
Well, I think it would be difficult for them to make that call now because of what, of course, they did with Gary Lineker, which basically condoned that sort of behaviour coming from one of their entertainment presenters. So in order to be consistent, the BBC would have to keep her on air.
Well, I don't know, because that was about tweets and he wasn't doing the news. So there may be a little bit of a difference in the BBC guidelines, which seem rather flexible, to say the least. Anyway, still to come tonight, Benjamin is getting a little bit heated about our lack of action on climate change. And I'm wondering why that has-been Tony Blair still feels the need to air his tiresome opinions. But coming up next, why do the government want us to drink less? Don't we deserve a little fun in life? It's almost time to live the ream. You're with the Saturday 5, live on GBNews, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6 is Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. As always, cheers very much for all your emails about tonight's topics. Dell's written in and says, I didn't think it would need saying that we should look after our war heroes. They stood strong in our time of need, and what do we do in theirs? Evict them. Regarding Albie's topic, Diana says Carol Vorderman is just like Meghan Markle. She'll say anything to get in the news and apparently be pumped with anything. But there we are. Now it's time for our next debate. Up next, this week's guest, presenter Reem Ibrahim, thinks government attempts to make us drink less are another example of a growing nanny state. It's high time we lived the Reem.
Imagine living in a world where the government dictates what you drink, what you eat, what you smoke, even the amount of sugar that you're allowed in your Coke Zero. Well, the government at the moment seem to be increasing the amount of nanny state measures that they're using to change your lives. Now, imagine wanting to make your own lifestyle decisions. The government want to change that for you. This year, the Institute of Economic Affairs published the Nanny State Index, which found on their league table of shame that the United Kingdom has moved up from 12th to 11th place of nanny state measures. Unfortunately, it does seem like the government seems to be wanting to create a lot of these nanny state measures in order to control what you do with your lives, whether that be tax on cigarettes, whether that be taxes on alcohols. This is this is really quite ridiculous when they're trying to affect your own life individually. Now, fundamentally, we looked at the Institute of Economic Affairs report this week. They found that actually a ban on alcohol advertisements do not impact consumption. Now, this kind of idea has been floated around by the likes of Humza Yousaf from the SNP, but really it's about why the government want to continuously control the amount that you drink. Now, the nanny state have come for your cigarettes, they've come for your alcohol, they've come for all sorts of things that you'd like to do with your life that mean that you enjoy it. I say we shouldn't let them take our alcohol. I could drink to the end of the nanny state. Cheers.
I like that very much.
I like that. So, Darren, I know that you seem to sort of have a similar perspective. Well, you drink, yes, of course, we all do. But you have a similar perspective when it comes to the nanny state. And I want you to tell us a little bit about why you think the nanny state seems to be encroaching on our individual liberty.
Because for a really simple reason, I just don't think any of this stuff works, right? Human beings have always liked naughty things. As soon as we found out about alcohol, you know, Jesus Christ did a fair bit with wine. It actually turns out that we quite like the stuff. We like naughty things, things that are bad for us. But when the SNP, for example, which you mentioned at the start there in your remarks, the SNP brought in minimum unit pricing for alcohol. Now, you look at the evidence around that. What's it done? Well, it's made alcohol more expensive, yes, absolutely. But at the same time, you've seen drug deaths going up. People are saying, well, I can't afford me cider anymore. Might as well go out and buy smack instead. This is terrible stuff. The absurd consequences of these policies.
It's taken quite the turn.
Crucially, just to add to that point, I don't know if people have switched from alcohol to drugs directly, and sometimes they go hand in hand, but it certainly hasn't helped with problem drinking, and that's what I think the government's focus should be on. They should be investing in facilities to help people with really bad alcoholism and problem drinkers. That's what they should focus on.
How should they pay for it?
The irony of nanny state banning advertising on alcohol is just so ludicrous, because we have a massive burgeoning industry of non-alcoholic alternatives. This is a huge industry for people. Actually, fewer younger people are drinking than ever before, according to statistics. So it really is that they're trying to ban advertising for a diminishing group
all of us,
while people are actually adopting healthier lifestyles.
Absolutely, and all of us have to suffer as a result of it. I mean, really, when it comes to the differences between the cost of living crisis and the government then actually sort of bending to the knees, bending over backwards for public health lobbyists, we always know who ends up being the winner. And I think that fundamentally it's about health and lifestyle choices. I know that when I smoke a cigarette, that's bad for me. The government don't need to tell me that. They don't need to hike up prices so that it's really difficult for me to be able to afford those cigarettes. I know that it's bad.
But how should... I think you made a very good point about there needing to be more facilities to tackle problem drinking and people with alcoholism. I'm all for that. I think there should be more facilities for people with lung cancer and the most amazing cancer treatments to treat people that have lung cancer, for example. But how do you propose we pay for it? You guys, apart from Benjamin, all go on about how high the tax burden is. In fact, I think, Benjamin, you've even gone on about that. But we have to pay for things. And actually, I, as a social smoker, am not opposed to paying for expensive cigarettes in order to pay for the health care that I might need.
Maybe you can afford it, Albie, but
later on in life.
As someone that's just graduated from university...
I don't think that's a bad trade-off. If you need a service, you should pay for it somehow. If it's not going to be paid for at the point of use, then it's paid through via taxation.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's a nonsense argument, because banning advertising will just reduce the amount of money.
But I think we're not just talking about advertising here, we're talking about this whole topic.
All sorts of nanny state measures. And you know, if you really want to save...
I'm pro-sin taxes, as you all know. I think if you're going to take a part in this activity, which we know is unhealthy, which we know is going to put a burden on the state, those that take part in that activity should pay for it through taxation if necessary.
There's 2 points to make here. The reason why it puts a burden on the state is because, of course, we've got a National Health Service, which means that my lifestyle choices are impacted by other people. It's all paid for by a socialist healthcare system. But the amount of money, I mean, if you really want to save the NHS, buy more cigarettes. The amount of money that we end up paying in taxation whenever we buy a cigarette actually means that...
And I'm for that. I've just said I'm for that.
It's absolutely unfair.
First of all, so you're saying that you don't believe that people should have health healthcare free at the point of use. That's what you appear to have just said.
What I want to see...
No, a yes or no will suffice.
What I want to see is...
yes or no?
You want to ask about my views on healthcare reform. I would like to see the United Kingdom actually establish a better healthcare system, like the likes of Germany, Sweden, Denmark, the
That's
Netherlands.
a politician's answer if ever I heard one.
They're still free at the point of use.
And then, of course, you know, it's important to note that, you know, you are in the pocket of the pro-smoking lobby. You know, they've given you an award. They give you slap-up free dinners and wine.
Oh,
you know, it's important to note that.
That is a ludicrous argument.
And the truth is that if you're talking about advertising and whether it has an effect on habit, well, first of all, you know, why on earth do you think people pay for adverts, pay tens, hundreds of millions in advertising campaigns? Let me finish.
Does anyone at home listening or watching this believe that Benjamin Butterworth would say no to a slap-up meal from a tobacco lobbyist? Because I certainly don't think so.
But look, it obviously affects people's behaviour. And in, what was it, the early 2000s or the late 90s, they ended smoking advertising for smoking products. And
totally right.
What effect did it have? Did smoking fall or get higher?
So smoking has fallen not as a result of the ban on smoking indoors, or as a result of
cultural consequence.
No, the reason why we've seen smoking rates decline is because we've introduced vaping, and vaping has been the most. Vaping has been the most successful tool to allow people to quit smoking.
Smoking rates have been falling since the 90s, Reem. Vapes have been around for, what, the last 2, 3, 4 years?
They've been around for at least 20 years.
Not in mainstream adoption.
E-cigarettes have been the most effective tool to allow people to quit smoking.
The evidence that these things make you go and buy them is that if you were to put on lots of television on a Saturday night, much worse television, it'll be full of fast food adverts because people go out and buy a pizza on a Saturday night.
It's
the same reason why they have wine adverts.
You're so patronising to British people. You're effectively saying that they don't know how to control their own lives. The Nanny state should actually control their lives for them.
Who's banning people from buying alcohol or smoking cigarettes? No one.
You're letting them kill themselves with wine and fags.
That's enough. That's enough. Let's see what you at home actually think about that. Please do get in touch. Let me know what you think about the nanny state. We always have different views on this. We seem to be divided as a country about whether to tell people what to do and what to eat and what to smoke and all that. But anyway, still ahead, our approach to climate change is getting Benjamin a little hot under the collar. But before we find out about that, let's get your latest weather.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Hope you were able to enjoy some of the sunny spells we did have around today, but there are still some showers lingering on tonight and into tomorrow, particularly for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, where there's still the chance that some of those could be heavy. A few pushing into Western England, Wales through the Bristol Channel area, but eastern areas of England generally staying drier with some clear intervals. It's not going to be too chilly overnight for most of us, holding up around 12 to 14 degrees Celsius, might drop into single figures across the far northeast of Scotland. Showers from the word go as well for central Scotland, pushing their way down further south into northern England as well. Still the chance that they could be heavy, maybe the odd rumble of thunder during the day as well. For the southwest, though, we are going to see the cloud building as outbreaks of rain push their way in for Wales, southwest England, then into Northern Ireland and eventually southeast England later on as well. Where you do hold on to the sunshine, though, climbing to highs around 21, 22 degrees Celsius. That area of low pressure that's bringing this rain will steadily be progressing its way eastwards overnight. Light winds further to the north where those isobars are spaced well apart but squeezing together across the south. Really quite breezy first thing on Monday morning, potential for 40-mile-an-hour gusts along some coast of the English Channel. These outbreaks of rain still lingering in places as well. A few brighter spells for central England, but the rest of the sunshine certainly reserved for northern areas of Scotland. And there'll be further showers as we do head into the rest of the week as well. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
So we're not all burning alive. But anyway, I'm very much looking forward to hearing Benjamin's plan to solve climate change. Look outside, not a lot of it. But before that, it's the Carver Palaver, as Emily asks why Tony Blair, remember him, has suddenly decided to weigh in on every topic under the sun. You're with GB News on Saturday 5.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I
don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. Cheers very much for your emails and your company. Freddie's written in. He says, "Hi, Darren. Happy birthday, lad. Thank you very much. It's disgraceful the way the World War II veteran has been treated. Thanks for highlighting this." Well, you get my Victoria Cross tonight for doing so, he goes on tonight. That's very kind. Regarding Ream's topic, Sue says it's a pity MPs don't follow their own nanny state proposals. They get drunk on work premises on subsidised alcohol, paid for by us, the taxpayer. Exactly. When Albie Hammond Corner's in there, it'll be exactly the same. Now, it's time for our next discussion. Up next, it's Emily, and she's wondering why former PM Tony Blair is back on the scene. It's time for the Carver Palaver.
Yes, has anyone else noticed that he's been piping up? He's been quite vocal recently, but he did say something quite sensible this week. In an interview about climate change, he suggested that costly green policies here in the UK are futile because our carbon emissions are dwarfed by countries like China. That is demonstrably the case. Leading by example is one thing, but no ULEZ scheme or heat pump rollout is going to have the slightest impact on the global temperature. I think that's quite obvious. It's quite amusing, actually, to see Blair, the great liberal internationalist, appear a little sceptical of the net zero drive. How unfashionable of him. But this week, he said something a little less sensible, too. Tony Blair said Brexit continues to fill him with a constant sadness. To be fair, it's hardly surprising he feels a little down in the dumps about it all. After all, it was his ambition to be President of Europe before the British people rudely took that opportunity away from him, wasn't it? Now it seems he has greater ambitions, though, to be the President of the world, or at least to craft a Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, in his image. But anyway, what annoyed me was his assertion that a future generation will take Britain back into the European Union. He seemed quite certain about that, as if it is Brexit voters that are stuck in the past. In my view, It's the likes of Tony Blair who are the ones who are stuck in the past, actually. He may be gutted that we've left the European Union, but the vast majority of us have accepted, if not welcomed wholeheartedly, the public's decision. Either way, it looks like he very much has the ear of Keir Starmer, and that can only mean trouble. So there we go. There's my thoughts on Tony Blair's interventions this week. Darren, what do you make of Tony Blair and the way he is asserting himself, one might say?
I think it's very clear that Tony Blair is going to have one hell of a lot of influence if the polls are correct and Sir Keir Starmer is in number 10. And I'm not sure that's especially a good thing, because he disagrees even with Benjamin Butterworth on climate change, on net zero. He agrees with me, Darren Grimes. So, you know, you're a fallen hero, but we'll get on to that in a second. Because he also is pushing these digital ID cards and things like that, and his institute's going really big on these things. And I say, who are his funders, right? That's one question that you always ask Reem Ibrahim. Well, who are Tony Blair's funders? Who's funding him to push all of these wacky, zany ideas?
Maybe his son.
Well, I mean, there are a whole host of people it could be. Are there firms that are set to make some cash out of digital ID cards? He was all for COVID passports and all these other things.
Well, does he not provide consultants to governments around the world?
600.
He has his fingers in many pies, our Tony.
He definitely does, and I wish he would keep his fingers out of the British pie, I'll tell you that much for free, because anything that man touches is poisoned, frankly.
In fairness to Sir Tony Blair, sorry, excuse me, I accidentally didn't include his entire title there.
One man's sir is another man's...
Princess? I don't know. Anyway, he's not only been influential on Keir Starmer's potential government, you know, the Labour shadow cabinet, he was also very influential on the Boris Johnson-led government during the COVID vaccine period, because, of course, it was Tony Blair's institute that came up with the idea of only administering half the vaccine so that you could administer more vaccines to more people more quickly. So, actually, he's not just influential on the left.
I only got half a vaccine.
Well,
the outrage.
It was a smaller dose that his advice was, that his institute's advice was, and it was actually followed. So, actually, he's managed to fashion himself as probably the most influential ex-Prime Minister that we've ever had.
And he was the most influential Prime Minister. You know, he won more votes than Margaret Thatcher. He's the most successful post-war Prime Minister at the ballot box. He ruled for 10 years.
It's electoral success that you're talking about, but actually...
You know, and the truth is that you look at when he was in charge, well, economic growth was higher, people's salaries were higher, the number of boats coming over was lower.
The tax burden was lower.
The tax burden was lower. The NHS waiting times were lower. He did a damn sight better job
Benjamin,
than the lot
you know your
since
political
them.
history and just history. You do know we then had a financial crash, and since then our economy has been quite stagnant, which is a real shame. But I'm not sure how Tony Blair would have
Blair's the only Prime
manoeuvred us out of
Minister
these tetchy waters.
who had every single quarter of his premiership have economic growth. Can you imagine that right now? And so when you look at someone who managed to make tens of millions of people's lives better and safer, then I think that is someone we should take
Unemployment was higher at the end of Tony Blair's government than under a Conservative
The top rate of tax was 40% in 2007.
Yeah, but unemployment has been higher at the end of every Labour government than compared to Conservative.
Unemployment went up after the financial crash, and it was higher under Gordon Brown than it is right now.
So at the end of the last Labour government, was unemployment higher or lower than it is?
At the end of Tony Blair, it was about the same as now, I suspect, because Tony Blair's premiership was the start of low unemployment
at the moment, but that's not necessarily a good thing economically. It's more as a result of the fact that we've got huge amounts of vacancies. The problem with Tony Blair is that he does, I mean, we talk about the nanny state measures. I mean, he banned cigarette smoking inside pubs, which killed off 12,000 pubs in England and Wales.
Right. Better than killing off 12,000 people.
Well, we can all agree that Tony Blair is a bad man.
We can't.
So, still ahead, though, the greatest minds on the planet, like Sir Tony Blair, I dare say he would argue, they've all tried to fix climate change. Now, these towering intellects of science and all the rest of it have failed to do so. So our very own Benjamin Butterworth, he's going to have a go at solving that particular crisis. You're with the Saturday 5, live on GBNews.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight in My Big Opinion, with the Co-op supermarket reporting almost 200,000 offences in their stores in just half a year, Britain is now soft on crime. In My Take at 10, the wonderful children's comic The Beano gets a woke makeover. The real menace isn't Dennis, but these politically correct censors. My Mark Meets Guest is the author of a brand new book about the great train robber Ronnie Biggs. Plus Royal Insider Lady Victoria Hervey on a major setback for Prince Harry. We're live from 9.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. Thank you very much. You've been sending in your emails throughout the show. John says, Tony Blair was in power for years, so he must have been doing something right. We could do with that. We could do with a bit of that stability. Controversial. Taking Benjamin's side in that debate. Well, there's a first for everything. But it's time for our next one. So Benjamin's going to round things off, and with Europe sweltering in record temperatures, I should note, he is about to issue a call to arms. Take it away, Benjamin.
Yes, that's right. It's a serious one, but some of you aren't taking it very seriously. The era of global warming is over. Global boiling is here. That's what I can hear Emily laughing in the background. But, you know, people like her are the problem. Because if only we listen to the United Nations chief, Antonio Guterres, who says that the world is getting to a point where the air is unbreathable and the heat is unbearable. This month, July, is expected to be the hottest on record, maybe the hottest in 120,000 years. July 6th was the hottest day ever recorded. And the 5 hottest years have all been since 2015. And the problem is that some people aren't taking it as seriously as they should. As we watch Rhodes, the Canary Islands, Sicily, Switzerland, all having massive wildfires that are consuming their country and ruining their tourist seasons, still some people don't act. That's why Britain needs to take action against this. Otherwise, we, as an island nation, will face disaster ourselves. Will you be happy when Norfolk is underwater? When our trains and planes don't move, when our national drainage system means that we have floods just like, say, Germany did last year, their worst floods ever. And dare I say it, something that is close to lots of GB News viewers' hearts, immigration will go through the roof because as half the world becomes unlivable, millions will turn up on our shores, being one of the few places that won't be affected for a bit longer. That's why you need to take your tinfoil hats off and start tackling climate change. Now, Emily, you're back from a sunny holiday. Do you recognise the problems?
I was just wondering, Benjamin, considering we are heading towards a climate catastrophe, I would have thought that someone who cares so much about the boiling planet that we face, that they might curb their own jet-setting lifestyle.
Well, you know, I went to Nepal, which is what you're referring to, and
And the rest.
I travelled around Nepal in a bus, which is a very carbon...
Did you walk there in your sandals?
But do you know what? You know,
pull the other one.
You try to mock about a very serious topic, and actually, it's true.
Sorry, but you make it so easy.
But there are millions of people being seriously affected in other parts of the world, and one thing that makes me proud of our king is that he recognises a lot of those countries are in the Commonwealth.
I completely agree with you on that one. There are many countries in this world that are suffering from flooding, suffering from extreme weather. That is absolutely true, and that's why I think we should be focusing massively on mitigation, because fewer people are actually dying of extreme weather than they used to in the past, and that is because we put so much energy, innovation, the greatest minds have come up with ways to allow us to live in these
More people are dying of the cold, right? And actually, when it comes to Greece and Italy, arsonists are responsible, not the big bad climate.
Darren, the fires wouldn't have spread so quickly were the ground not so dry and there was not so much
Yes,
fuel.
that'll be because it's cold summer. It's summertime.
But it is
in Greece. It's hot in Greece.
It is much hotter in Europe at the moment than it has ever been. But, Benjamin, I do think you've got to be careful with some of the statistics that you use, because I think it actually detracts from what is quite an important argument. When you say things like this has been the hottest month in 120,000 years...
that's what the experts say.
When thermometers were invented in 1624, I just think comments like that are quite stupid.
We've just got... We've got little time, but I want to bring up this graph that I've got from London, London's air quality, showing that it's actually been better for, well, many lifetimes, actually. So arguably, actually, all of this stuff is a con.
Well,
look at that.
It's so unfair for you to say that people that are sceptical of climate change are people in tinfoil hats.
Of course they are.
That is ludicrous.
But look at this, Reem. London, air pollution.
Air pollution and climate change are obviously not the same thing. I can tell you're not a scientist.
I bet you like you, Les.
But look, well, that just shows that our attitudes that have meant that we have far fewer cars than 50 years ago on London streets have worked.
So if you look
at things like catalytic
we have a lot more
industry.
I know you're ditzy at the best of times, but if you were looking at that graph, you would know that getting rid of cars on the roads is a good thing. Now, Reem, I know you were trying to cut in there.
No, I was going to say, but I think that's not a result of banning cars or banning those kind of sort of huge amounts of measures. Actually, it's about technological innovation and about advancement. And actually, because the brightest and the best of our world have been able to create these advancements, like us, of course, but you've been able to create these advancements, which mean that actually we are able to mitigate climate change. So I don't like these draconian measures. Let's actually let the free market work.
But did you like the draconian measures, for example, of petrol users having to use unleaded petrol, for example?
Absolutely.
Or catalytic converters. Those were regulations put in place, draconian measures, as you might call them, to clean up London's
Let's end this show on a moment of agreement, because Reem is absolutely right. The answer to this is in having greener technology.
Exactly.
Britain is a science leader in the world. We have some of the best universities and best scientists, and that's why I think, dare I say it, Keir Starmer is right, that we should put a huge amount of investment to make Britain lead, because that's going to shape the next century.
All right, well, we're going to have to leave it there, sadly. I could have definitely gone back on that. But I want to say thank you very much to our brilliant guest for tonight, Reem Ibrahim, who has been wonderful. But Steve has written in saying, Reem smokes and drinks, my sort of girl. Well, there we are. You could be a date on the horizon. Nigel says, if the population has to listen to the likes of Benjamin Butterworth, it's not surprising people take to drink. I couldn't agree with you more. That might have been Nigel Farage. Next up, it's the brilliant Mark Dolan. Cheers very much for watching. I'll see yous again next week.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Hope you were able to enjoy some of the sunny spells we did have around today, but there are still some showers lingering on tonight and into tomorrow, particularly for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, where there's still the chance that some of those could be heavy. A few pushing into Western England, Wales, through the Bristol Channel area, but eastern areas of England generally staying drier with some clear intervals. It's not going to be too chilly overnight for most of us, holding up around 12 to 14 degrees Celsius, might drop into single figures across the far northeast of Scotland. Showers from the word go as well for central Scotland, pushing their way down further south into northern England as well. Still the chance that they could be heavy, maybe the odd rumble of thunder during the day as well. For the southwest, though, we are going to see the cloud building as outbreaks of rain push their way in for Wales, southwest England, then into Northern Ireland and eventually southeast England later on as well. Where you do hold on to the sunshine, though, climbing to highs around 21, 22 degrees Celsius. That area of low pressure that's bringing this rain will steadily be progressing its way eastwards overnight. Light winds further to the north where those isobars are spaced well apart but squeezing together across the south. Really quite breezy first thing on Monday morning, potential for 40-mile-an-hour gusts along some coast of the English Channel. These outbreaks of rain still lingering in places as well. A few brighter spells for central England, but the best of the sunshine certainly reserved for northern areas of Scotland. And there'll be further showers as we do head into the rest of the week as well. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye-bye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to